Parenting Great Kids is brought to you by Ravel, Education a la Carte. Want your child to flourish in his or her school environment, to master real-life skills, to succeed in his future endeavors? Now's the time to actively engage your child's education with Education a la Carte. In this practical book, parenting expert and longtime educator Dr. Kevin Leman takes the guesswork out of choosing the best schooling for your child. He explores the pros and cons of public, private, and charter schools, as well as homeschooling and online schooling. Visit revelbooks.com to learn more. And by MAGOOSH. Do you know a high school student preparing for the ACT or SAT? MAGOOSH Online Test Prep provides everything students need to get a great score and one step closer to their dream school. They offer study schedules, practice questions, practice tests, video lessons, and support from expert tutors with plans starting at just $79. Visit magoosh.com and enter the promo code MEG for a 20% off discount. That's magoosh.com, promo code MEG. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 38. Teaching your kids about other cultures. I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. Today, I'm excited to welcome author, blogger, and mother of three, Tsh Oxenreider, onto the podcast. We're going to be talking about a great globe-trotting adventure she went on with her family and the wonderful new book she wrote about it called At Home in the World. Also in this episode, I'll be featuring a listener question from a mom whose husband struggles with anger when speaking to their son. As always, I'll share my points to ponder for you to start using right away. Parents, remember, don't just download episodes. Click subscribe. When you do that, you're joining my parenting revolution, and every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. And we'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think. Also, not only are we on iTunes, but the Parenting Great Kids podcast is also available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcasts, subscribe today and don't miss a single episode. So now, my points to ponder. First, help your kids live each day, not just avoid dying. To borrow a principle from my friend John O'Leary, so many times we parents do everything that we can to protect our kids. And this means that many times we parent from fear. And this is never good. We don't want our kids to get hurt. We don't want their feelings to get hurt. We don't want them to have the wrong teacher, to have the wrong class, to be exposed to the wrong coach. We don't want them to play the wrong sport. What if they're better at another sport? And a lot of times we're just afraid to allow our kids to take some risks. Of course, we need to be reasonable and responsible in our parenting, but there are a lot of times we should stretch ourselves and our kids and live extraordinarily. So ask yourself, do I approach each day with my kids simply trying to keep them safe and healthy and avoid any risks at all? Am I afraid to try new things with my kids? I challenge each and every one of you parents to do something with your kids that at first may seem a little outrageous. Is there a trip you've always wanted to go on? Have you ever wanted to go camping or hiking with your kids, but you think, oh, they won't like that, or somebody's going to complain, or they're going to whine, or, I just don't know if I like sleeping on the ground? Have you ever taken your kids to a city where you have never been? Or are you just afraid, thinking, well, I'll save up my money, or, I just want to go because I really want to do it, but I know that my third youngest child is not going to be happy, so we better not go. I encourage you to try doing something with them that is just beyond your comfort zone and see what happens. And it's going to be beyond their comfort zone as well. You'll be amazed at what you find out about yourself and your kids. And very importantly, you'll find that your relationship with your kids will change. And that's what's going to be really fun about talking with Tish about her trip and her extraordinary adventure in packing up her kids and taking off to see the world. Second, closeness with your kids comes from sharing a stressful experience. You don't always get close to your family or a loved one by having easy experiences. But when you come together with one of your kids or all of your family at the same time, and you are sharing a stress, maybe you're all uncomfortable, maybe you're all afraid, maybe you're all cold, maybe you all don't know how to do something like pitch a tent or paddle a canoe or navigate a city. You know, parents ask me how they can have better relationships with their kids all the time. I hear that, and they wonder, how can I get closer to my kids? How do I connect with my kids? They never want to do anything with me, a lot of parents lament. This occurs often because we parents live parallel lives to our kids. We do our thing, they do their thing, we're in our comfort lane, and they're in their comfort lane. We're busy doing our thing, and they're busy doing their thing. We're at work, they're at school. They're at band practice, we're at PTA, or we're doing exercising in the evening. This causes us to feel very disconnected from our kids, and they feel disconnected from us. So what's the remedy? Camp, travel, do mission work together, do projects together. Share the same experience with your kids where both of you are out of your comfort zone. Both of you are stressed, and that forces all of you to work together. Maybe it's just you and your son or you and your daughter. It doesn't matter. Get yourself in a situation where both of you are a little uncomfortable, both of you are in new territory, and it forces you to work together, and that's a wonderful way to connect with your kids. Also, when we share stress together, we learn to understand one another better. We begin the experience on level ground. Neither of us knows what to expect, or neither of you knows what to expect. Neither is fully capable of navigating the territory, and each needs help from the other. Third, the time you choose to spend with your kids only strengthens your relationship. I tell parents with troubled kids this all the time. The answer for your child's issues and struggles and problems and your relationship issues with your kids is solved by spending more time together, not less. You know, so often parents with a troubled teenager want to ship them off to a camp out west or a program out west or in an inner city where they kind of fix the kids and they teach the kids what life is all about. And those are good. I'm not denouncing those or saying anything bad against those. Those have their place. But when you have strain in your relationship with your kids, or even if you don't have strain in your relationship with your kids, but you want to connect with them on a deeper level, you want to have a better relationship, spend more time together to figure out life. The more you argue, the more you're going to figure out the rules of arguing. The more you're going to figure out how to get past the arguing, to settle your differences. If you don't engage, if you don't argue, which is in itself a form of intimacy, remember, if you don't enter that area, you're never going to get closer to your kids, because parents often want to just spend nice, fun time with their kids. They don't want conflict. They don't want a confrontation. They don't want discord. They're afraid of discord with their kids because they're afraid that the kids will grow farther away from them. But the truth is sometimes it's the discord that actually draws you together. So always remember, the time you choose to spend with your kids face to face only strengthens your relationship. If you have come to a place with your kids where there's an impasse, of course, you need outside help navigating that. But what you will find when you listen to Tish talk about her experiences with her kids traveling the globe is that they were stressed. They spent a lot of time together. A lot of those times weren't easy and they weren't fun, and kids were upset, but it was intimate time together and they grew closer together. Their relationships were stronger because they spent so much face-to-face time together. Parents, we all know that talking with our kids about sex is uncomfortable. And when it comes to having that initial talk with your child about sex when they're about 8 years old, I always say in every couple there's one who's a chicken and one who's an even bigger chicken who just won't have the talk at all. But the truth is, no matter how uncomfortable it is, beginning a conversation about sex early with your child is extremely important because it puts you in the driver's seat. The tricky part is many parents often don't know where to begin or where to end. What if they say the wrong thing? What if they talk too much or too little or use the wrong words? Too often not knowing how or when they should approach the topic of sex with their child, many parents just don't do it. And then this leaves your child at the hands of the culture or his friends to teach him about sex. I have created a digital toolkit just for you called How to Have the Talk with Your Child. It walks you through the process of having that initial conversation with your child about sex. The toolkit's packed with a variety of resources and all the information you need to get ready to have that initial conversation, including ages and stages chart to help you determine when to have the talk with your child. There's an ebook on talking to your child about sex, a script to help guide you through the discussion. And for those of you who are really, really chicken, you're the big chicken, it even includes a video of me giving the talk directly to your child. How easy is that? Talking to your child about sex doesn't need to be intimidating or scary. It can be really a great experience, and it'll help you establish a strong relationship with your child. I'm excited to offer you How to Have the Talk with Your Child toolkit for 20% off. Just go to my website, megmeekermd.com, click on Parenting Resources, and user code TALKPODCAST when you check out. Parents, this topic about sex is far too important to hand over to somebody else to talk to your kids about. You need to do it. Go to my website, check out How to Have the Talk with Your Child toolkit, 20% off. You need to stay in the driver's seat when it comes to talking to your kids about sex, and I'm here to help. So parents, thanks for listening. This is episode number 38. Stay with us. Parents, I want to invite you to listen to a wonderful conversation I had with Tsh Oxenreider about their family's journey around the world and what they all learned about experiencing other cultures together. Well, Tsh, thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
You as well. You're an extraordinary lady. You really march to a different drummer, and I love it because I think that you do some things in your life that a lot of mothers would love to do but are scared to do. So let's start off with talking about your book, At Home in the World, Reflections on Belonging While Wandering the Globe. You made an extraordinary decision. And that is that you took your whole family, 3 kids, husband, and you, on a world tour for 9 months. How long had you been thinking of doing that before you actually did it?
Well, we had come up with the idea about 4 years before then. My youngest was a newborn, and so I was sitting there holding him in my arms, and we had just moved back from living overseas, and my husband Kyle and I were talking about how much we had missed. Like, one of our favorite things about living overseas was just instantly giving our kids a more global perspective, right outside our front door. And I was telling my husband how much I kind of missed that living back in the States now. And he just had this idea of like, well, just because we live here doesn't mean we're confined here. We can still travel. So we just kind of bookmarked this idea of one day taking our kids around the world. But we knew it wouldn't happen right away. So it was just an idea for several years. But then it was about a year before we actually took off where we started actually planning it. Who decided, okay, I think it's time first? Was it you or your husband? Gosh, I don't remember who actually made the call, but I think it was my husband who actually said, let's do this thing. Let's put a date on the calendar. This seems like the right time. But we both were sort of waiting it out. Some of our criteria were that we wanted our kids all to be old enough to both be out of diapers and be able to carry their own backpacks. We have some friends that have done extended travel with babies, so it can be done. But for us personally, we just liked the idea of not dealing with that. And there's something different about the age from 3 to 4, I find, in travel. And like something about 4-year-olds, they can at least somewhat start to entertain themselves, start to not, touch and explore everything. And so our youngest was 4 when we left. So that's why we went when we did.
And how old were your other kids?
So our oldest was 9, and then we have a middle one who was 6, and they had birthdays on the trip. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So the two of you sit down and they say, okay, it's time. Our youngest is going to be 4. And then what? How did you know where to start and how long to go?
Well, in some ways, we liken our trip to somewhat like getting married or having a baby. You're never going to have all your ducks in a row. And if you wait till you're 100% ready, you're just never going to go. At some point, you just need to, bite the bullet. So what we decided to do was break this up into sets of 3. So we decided, let's just buy tickets, our flight for the first 3 months, and then decide. We wanted kind of an escape hatch in case we were like, yeah, this is a terrible idea. Let's go back home. And so we bought our first set of just open-ended tickets a few months before we left, and we went to Asia first. And the reason we did that, so basically we went westbound, was for season reasons, like for weather reasons. We looked at the map and we tracked it, and we decided it would be really nice for packing reasons to try and kind of chase a summer as best we could, or at least warmer weather for as long as we could, just because we didn't want to have to carry like parkas and sweaters and things like that. So we went that direction so that we could hit the southern hemisphere right during what we know as winter, and then go that way.
Well, that sounds reasonable. I think I would do the same thing. It's a great idea. Now, you have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and jobs to think about. How did you navigate work and school?
I'm a writer, so I can work from anywhere. And that was also one of the reasons we decided to go when we did, because we both said, we don't know how long this is going to last, so let's take advantage of it. And then my husband works for a nonprofit, or he did at the time, and had a job that more or less he could do from home. He just needed regular meetings. And so he talked to his team, his boss, and asked if he could do his job for 9 months from the road, and Skype into meetings and do all that, because he was mostly already working remotely anyway. And so they said yes. They were really flexible about it. And then when it came to schooling, we did what we call world schooling, which is similar to homeschooling, except that you're not at home. And we actually had done that the year before out of practice. We decided, if there's going to be one less thing to get used to, let's make it how we do the kids' school, and they can kind of get used to this rhythm of how this works. And so we homeschooled the entire year before, just to prep for our, taking it with us on the road. So that was actually not a huge transition for us. All it meant was, getting things out of backpacks instead of desks or shelves.
Did you stay in hotels? Did you rent homes? Did you go from place to place to place?
Yeah, we mostly did guest houses, off places like Airbnb and HomeAway, because we love the idea of, especially, this is a big philosophy I have for traveling with kids anyway, is if you can do things to make it somewhat, it doesn't have to be literally like home, but, if you can provide for your kids a backyard and a kitchen, it makes all the difference when it comes to just travel sanity. So that way kids can have a place to run and be outside without bothering people, or just being loud, being themselves. And if you can cook some of your meals together to where you're not always having to eat out, then it makes the whole thing just run much smoother. So we did guest houses as best we could. And then we also adopted this philosophy of, we would go hard with traveling. We'd explore a lot. We'd see a lot. We'd move around a lot, and then we would park for a while. And so we called those our low and slow moments. And so with each one of those third portions of the trip, we stopped someplace for an extended amount of time. So, for example, in Asia, we traveled all over. We did China, Hong Kong, Singapore. We went all over the place. But then we got to Thailand, and we stayed there for 6 weeks. And we rented a guest house for a while, and we just caught up on life, school and work, and we lived, quote, normally, in terms of like dinners at home. We're going to do routine and things like that, along with sightseeing. But that's honestly what made the trip doable, is so that we weren't constantly on like travel mode, really.
Those are great tips, because I think your idea is genius as far as taking your kids to different cultures and staying there for an extended period of time. I have a good friend who has parented similarly, but what she and her husband do is they take the month of March, pull their kids out of school, take sabbaticals from work, and they go live in a different country for 1 month. So they go and they stay. They sightsee a little bit, but they mostly park themselves. And it's really been an extraordinary experience for the kids growing up. So your tips are: go warm, travel hard, and then park yourself. Make sure you have a reasonable home environment, kitchen and a backyard, so at least your kids can feel, and you can feel sort of settled as a family. You can have a little bit of family routine thrown in there. I think that's very, very smart. What did you do about the language issue?
The language issue is very minimal. First of all, a lot of places do speak English, which, we wanted to respect as best we could by at least attempting their native tongue. So we weren't just coming in and saying, you speak English, right? But a lot of places, it is not a challenge to get around linguistically. China was probably the hardest just because, there were a few times where we did have to go to a restaurant and just point and say like, well, let's hope for the best. Let's see what this is. But there's all sorts of tools. We would just write down words as we learn them. We learn as best we could. Hello, goodbye, thank you. Those kinds of things in the languages as absolute best we could. Bathroom, and then, and then a lot of places just naturally speak English. And then there's even just tools, Google Translate app is not ideal. There's a lot of kinks to it, but it works in a pinch. In fact, there's tools on there where it's got a camera mode where you can hold it up to a sign or a menu, and the letters will unscramble and turn into the language of your choice just right there. So, yeah, we would be like in a restaurant in Germany. I would just hold it over the menu, and it would just turn into English. So it was pretty handy in times like that.
To make sure you're not ordering your children's pig's brains or something with their spaghetti.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, when you left in the early days of your trip, were your kids excited? Were they hesitant? Were they not wanting to go? What was their frames of mind?
Well, with having kids the range we did, there was a pretty big difference in reaction from the 9-year-old to the 4-year-old. Our 4-year-old is just very much like, okay, wherever we're going is where we're going. He's a preschooler. He barely even understood that we were in a different country, all the way to the 9-year-old and some with the 6-year-old. We were uprooting them a little bit from some friends and from some routine. Yet at the same time, one of the reasons we also went when we did was that they weren't so old enough to where we really did have to uproot from some commitments or some deeper relationships. They're still fairly flexible at the time, but there wasn't too much nervousness in the sense of like, are we going to be safe? Because I really do feel like they pick up on that from the parents a lot, and if the parents seem kind of go with the flow and things like that, they will be more likely to do that. But along the way, there was definitely some mixed feelings of both. We love what we're doing, but we also just love our quiet, simple life. Our daughter, who's 9, she was our oldest and turned 10 on the trip. She did experience some loneliness. She wanted some companionship, some friends. We tried to get together with friends as best we could the whole time. And we actually met a lot of great kids, families with kids. Of course, they all turned out to be boys. It seemed like, to where she was like, oh, boys again. But she also learned a lot of life lessons about loneliness. And we had some great conversations, and she read some great books during that time. And then the other thing is, back to what I was talking about earlier about the low and slow times, it turned out that those were our kids' favorite times, to where if you ask them now, what are some of your favorite memories from the trip, most likely they will bring up those 3 times where we parked. We parked in Thailand, Australia, and France for at least a month, and all those times. And they will bring up things like, the time that we played in the woods and we built, if you know what Terabithia is, it's a book where they kind of create their own little village in the woods, and they love doing that in France because of where we stayed in the countryside. Or they'll bring up just sort of the simple life. We lived in Australia for a while in the suburbs there. And so to me, that was also a life lesson for parenting of how important the simplicity is really in their souls, that they crave they crave a lot more of just routine and simple living than we give them credit for. And my husband Kyle and I even had this saying as we were traveling, when everything's awesome, nothing's awesome. And we experienced that about halfway through whenever we were on safari in Kenya, and we were just looking at the animals and we were like, kids, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And their response wasn't quite what we had hoped, like they were definitely excited to see it, but then they're like, okay, let's move on. And Kyle and I were like, this is interesting. And we kind of were hit with the realization, wow, they've done a lot of stuff. And yet at the end of the day, they are excited about the trampoline in the backyard, or the, just the simple playing with sticks and rocks. And that was a good takeaway for us.
I really hope that parents hear what you just said. When everything is awesome, nothing's awesome. Because we can so easily apply that to life in the United States, because you're speaking on behalf of all kids, not just little kids, but middle school kids and teenagers, is what kids crave and want is connection with parents, connection with siblings, and they want slower time, and that they want relationship over experience. And we're very much like you and your husband traveling. You want to see the Great Wall. You want to see giraffes run. You want to see the 7 wonders of the world. And in the United States, the equivalent of that here is I want my kids to have the best soccer experience, the best dance experience, the finest tutor in this. And so we farm our kids out trying to get them great experiences, but those just don't deliver for kids in the end. We think they do as adults because it makes us feel good that we're exposing our kids and they're doing all these things. But I think what really helps deliver to the soul of a child, as you said, is really simple experience with family time together. And I love that came out of that trip. Let's dive a little deeper. What's the single most important thing that you, Tish, learned about yourself as a woman and mother?
Yeah, when people ask me what was the best and the worst part of the trip, it ends up being the two sides of the same coin. And one of them, it was the constant togetherness as a family. On the one hand, that was the best part of the trip because the 5 of us had an experience that only the 5 of us had, and we all experienced at about the same level the whole time. And so we have such a great foundational memory for the rest of our lives that we can go back to, that we still go back to daily. Remember X, Y, and Z from, all these places, and we each remember different things. And it's just such a neat experience that we grew really close together. And then on the other side, it was so hard for me as an introvert, as someone who also works, and as a mom and wife that just craves a little bit of that autonomy and a little bit of that quiet, that it was very hard to find just by nature of what it was. When we're staying in a guest house, we're not staying in a typically what we would think of as normal. They're usually very small. We're usually sharing rooms of some sort. And because the kids get uprooted pretty frequently, there was a little bit of tiredness, crankiness, complaining and all those things. And there were times where I just thought I might lose it, I remember one time in Singapore, my husband Kyle knew that he could just tell I was going to lose it. And he's a little bit more, he's an introvert too, but he's a little more go with the flow and open to new and different things than I am. And so he just said, okay, you stay here. I'm going to take the kids out. And so he and the kids had a day out in Singapore. And I literally stayed back and put on my eye mask and listened to quiet music. And I took a long nap. And then I needed to pray and I needed to journal and just be alone. Yeah. And that made all the difference. And so to me, that was like a lesson of like, even in the midst of this family bonding, I still need to take care of myself so that I am a better wife and mom. And of course I knew that, but it's still different than when you're out there living it and you realize, oh no, I really have to do that.
I'm really going to crash here.
Yeah.
Somebody in this house is going to have a meltdown. and I sure hope it's not me. Because I think that at the outset, anybody listening who's never ventured on this kind of adventure that you did, one of the first hesitations would say, wait a minute, you mean 9 months with 5 of us together? That's it? No friends, no family? Are you kidding me? All we're going to do is fight. And I would say, yep, that's why you need to go do it. There's so much that you learn in being together. You learn what you need. You learn what your kids need. You have a shared experience of stress, which is awesome for a family. You go to a place where kids are tired and you're tired and the food may be terrible and you're moving to another place. But there's something that binds you so well when you share a stressful experience, because as you said, you came home and all of you own that and nobody else understands. But I think the whole idea of spending that much time alone with your kids is daunting for a lot of parents, but that which is daunting is exactly where we need to go. So I love hearing you explain about that. It's like, okay, now I just sort of need my break. Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Tsh Oxenreider. We need to take a quick break, but please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Now that it's back to school season, it feels like there's a million new things to do every day. And getting a balanced, healthy, kid-friendly dinner on the table every night is easier said than done. Now you can cook delicious, nutritionist-approved recipes the whole family will love with the new family menu from SUNBASKET. SUNBASKET is a meal kit delivery service that sends organic and sustainable ingredients right to your door. They also offer paleo, lean and clean, gluten-free, and vegetarian options. Each week, SUNBASKET features a recipe co-created with Chef Tyler Florence. And friends, I've been using SUNBASKET for a number of months now, and I love it. And I'm a cook. I like to cook, and these foods are terrific. Each SUNBASKET recipe comes with pre-measured ingredients and is ready in around 30 minutes. It's easy to prep and easy cleanup, perfect for busy school nights. Plus, you get to skip the grocery store. One less thing to worry about. Go to sunbasket.com/Meg today to get $35 off your first order. That's sunbasket.com/Meg for $35 off. sunbasket.com/Meg. Fall is here, and along with cooler temperatures, it's bringing great rewards thanks to the return of the Take the Money and Ride event from Cooper Tires. For a limited time, you can receive up to a $100 Cooper Tires prepaid card when you buy a new set of 4 qualifying tires. And these aren't just any old pieces of rubber. They're great Cooper tires that include the high-performance Cooper Xeon, RS3 G1 TM, the long-lasting Cooper CS5 Grand Touring, the rugged Cooper Discoverer AT3, and many more. Now that you know you can claim a reward of up to $100 during the Take the Money and Ride event, there's no reason to wait. Stop in today and discover why smart drivers have been counting on Cooper for great tires made by passionate people since they opened their doors in 1914. For more information on Cooper Tires or to find a Cooper Tires dealer near you, visit coopertire.com. What did you learn about your kids on the trip?
I honestly learned that they are so much more adaptable and flexible than I give them credit for. You know, I think I would project some of my adult perspective onto them sometimes. You know, we're waiting at a bus stop and it's not on time. And then once we get on the bus, it's hot and crowded and sweaty and it's bumpy and all those things. And so my feelings would bubble up of like, oh my gosh. And then naturally look at the kids are like, are they okay? Are they going to lose their minds? And I would look and they're just like, fine, you know, and that's not to say they were 100%, but most of the time they were fine. And I realized how much, you know, in life, a lot of times I project my own feelings onto them instead of like letting them experience hard things and letting them just be themselves and define or translate what the moment means for them instead of my own personal personality, because obviously all 3 of them are different. And in fact, one of my kids who has some sensory issues and he's a little bit outside the box, it turned out like traveling was fantastic for him. And we thought maybe it would be the opposite, but it turned out like he needed that sensory input. He actually thrived on things like big cities with all the noise and things to look at. He even commented that he loved being on metros and standing up on them, just holding a pole, because he loved that feeling, the swaying, the back and forth, because it made him like, it gave his body the input. And it's like, I would have never known that had I not just let him be himself and do that thing and not put my own feelings onto him. So that was a great takeaway for me about, you know, letting the kids be their adaptable, flexible selves that they are.
When your kids were having a difficult time, and I'm sure at points along the way somebody had a hard time, did you feel guilty? And if so, what did you do with that guilt?
There were definitely times when it was like that. Well, first of all, I have to say my husband, Kyle, is the voice of reason, and he is just incredibly calm and has such a great perspective. So there would be times where I'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, for example, there were times like in Ethiopia where 2 out of 3 of our kids got car sick on this long 8-hour trip and they both threw up. And one of the main reasons was because we forgot water and we were going up into the highlands. And so they got dehydrated. And I felt like, oh my gosh, this is such a 101 mom move. Bring water on a long trip. I know this. And yet, you know, so part of me was like, I can't believe I forgot about this. I was thinking too much about logistics for travel that the basics weren't met. Yes. And so I'd struggle with that. But then what Kyle would remind me of, what I would remember, is that this would happen stateside anyway. Like there would be some version of it at home, whether that's, we still get sick from time to time, or there's still questionable food issues, or there's still schedule mishaps or whatever. Basically that travel didn't cause these issues. You're just trading a set of issues for some other one. And I think there's so much of life like that. Not in a Debbie Downer kind of way, like life is just one set of problems after another. But a lot of times we forget sometimes that it's not like the grass is perfectly green on the other side. It's that what issues are you willing to deal with? I think of that a lot whenever parents just wring their arms about how should we educate our kids? Is this school the best? Is this school the best? Is this method the best? Well, it's not like any one is perfect. It's more a matter of like, what issues do I want to deal with? Am I willing to deal with this set of issues or those set? And so I had to remember that a lot on the trip, that this is just the set of issues we were dealing with. And it's not like if we weren't traveling, everything would be roses,
I ask you that not to point the finger and say you should feel guilty. I ask it to say you shouldn't feel guilty because this is life. And the truth is, our kids are going to experience discomfort. They're going to throw up somewhere. They're going to have bad experiences at school. And I think that so many times we worry about the discomfort in whatever form it comes. And as mothers, we take that on and go, oh, I did something wrong. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do it? But to learn to let that go and say, you know what? My child's going to survive. I mean, yes, they're throwing up and I forgot water. And that was kind of a dumb thing to do. But move on. It's okay for our kids to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's okay for our kids to have bad experiences. And I think that when we approach it as though, you know what? That's just part of life. Rather than, as you say, wringing your hands and blaming ourselves and why did I do this? Kids pick up on that and they start to think, well, this shouldn't be. I shouldn't be throwing up in Ethiopia. What's wrong with my mother? What's wrong with my father? Well, don't go there. That's just life and it's okay. And as a matter of fact, it's more than okay. I think that it's good for kids to go through struggles of all sorts and come out and parents go, yep, you know what? See, you did it.
Yeah.
Yep, it's okay. Because we need to learn to handle life and not take everything so seriously and feel so guilty about so much. And guilt just takes so many parents, especially mothers, down, is what I see. Now, you write a lot about simplicity. You have a podcast called The Simple Show. And I know that you really try to encourage people to live more simply. After your trip, which sounds very complicated and hectic and a bit crazy to those of us who haven't done it, how did you come back home and apply skills of living more simply?
Yeah, I had already been writing and thinking about simple living for a long time before this trip. So it wasn't as though like we came back to just this huge storage unit full of stuff that we now felt, like we shouldn't have. But we did have a storage unit of things. And what was interesting is I was a little bit hesitant before we left about this whole idea of living out of a backpack, thinking, how am I going to handle this for 9 months? Well, it turned out that was one of my favorite experiences. I loved having everything I owned on my back and, only choosing between 3 t-shirts and things like that. And people have asked me before, how did your kids handle that, especially not having all their toys? And it turned out that was one of my favorite things too. I loved watching the kids be resourceful and inventive with their playthings. Whenever we would stay someplace, they would just find things to play with instead of just go to their stuff. And so when we came back, we looked at the storage unit and we got rid of another probably half of it, which was so funny because I already felt like we're doing great by American standards, but it's not even about the quantity of things. I don't feel like there's some magic number everybody should aim for. But to me, what was a good reminder to me is how much I am wired to love both travel and home. I think both are, equal parts of me. And that my favorite definition of simple living is living holistically with your life's purpose. And so what I mean by that is, when you know how you're wired, when you know how you're made, and then you point the parts of your life, all the little moving parts toward that instead of what maybe society or the world tells you quote should, then things start just lining up and making sense. And you have only what you need, even if that amount looks different than your neighbors, or, how you spend your time, how you spend your money, where you choose to live, all those things start making more sense. And so the trip affirmed that in me, that this is an important kind of part of me and a part of our family culture. And so we want to keep experiencing things together. We both want to love being at home. We value being bored a lot. We think that's really important, actually. And we value community. We want to dig deep into that and love where we live. And then we also still want to go out and experience things together. And so we sort of just adjust our life in that way so that we can do that. You know, we don't have too much stuff. We save money where we can so that we can experience those things instead of buying more stuff. We don't overcommit to things so that we have the freedom and the time as a family to like just go away for the weekend. There's lots of life little lessons. And I think, you know, there is a definite intersection between going out and exploring the world and kind of loving how the world that we live in, and also living simply so that you can do that.
Well, and that's remarkable, the juxtaposition of you five with just backpacks on, going to some of the coolest places in the whole world. So let me, just for all of our listeners, I want to clarify, you did not take suitcases.
Right. We all took backpacks. All five of us wore our backpacks all year long. That's right.
So you literally each lived out of what you had in your backpack for 9 months.
Yes, that's right. And there were times that I would pick up a new shirt or something, but I would exchange it for something else. I wouldn't just add more and more.
It's funny. My husband does that. He believes he only needs 5 shirts. So if somebody gives him a shirt, he gives a shirt away because he just does it. So his closet is empty, which is very cool. But it takes a lot of discipline in the United States because we're a culture of stuff, and we're a culture of jamming our schedules packed full because we believe the more we bring in and the more we do, the happier life will be. Did you take a computer or an iPad or anything?
That's my office. So I brought my laptop, and that's how I worked. And then we also had an iPad for the kids' school because a bit of what we did was digital, and we needed, you know, to have access to that. And they used our computers as well sometimes. But we really didn't have much. We had our laptops. My husband had a camera beyond the phone and the iPad. And then our 2 kids that were reading at the time, also, we got them Kindles. And it was great because we could also sync those to our local library. And so we had infinite amount of books still that we could read. And we would pick books based on where we were, which kind of added to the experience as well. And so we're grateful for the technology that we were able to bring, for sure.
Wow. Well, I'm inspired. I'll tell you, I want to go do this. My husband and I have done medical mission trips in South America, which is awesome. And it's a similar kind of thing where you take very little and you learn to just be comfortable with so very little. As a matter of fact, when you come home to the United States, it would take me a couple weeks before I could go into a grocery store because it's just too overwhelming. So a lot of parents who are listening, Tish, can't go away for 9 months, but maybe they could do something for a week or a weekend. What would your recommendations? How can they translate what you received, which is so rich from your experience with your kids? How can they reproduce that in a smaller time frame?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in those too, because you know, a lot of times when people say, I could never do it, you did, what they are doing in their minds are taking the kids that they know and putting them out on the road, because what actually happens is the more kids travel, the better travelers they become. Yes. And so when we finally went out, it wasn't like that was the first time we had traveled with our kids. We had done all sorts of road trips, all sort of weekend getaways. And I am a massive believer in that, in those experiences. And we still do that all the time as a family. So whenever people say, where do I begin? I'll say, like, start traveling now and do it in small little ways. And you don't need to wait for everything to be perfect. In fact, do it in a bare bones kind of experience, because that is where you'll get inventive and you'll see how much you can, quote, endure. I'm not saying like just, you know, be martyrs for no reason, but go camping, even if you think you're not a camping family, and don't take very much and see what happens. Another big thing I like to encourage people to do is to go to your closest big city for the weekend or even for the day and just rely on public transportation and see how you do, you know, to where you don't have that little capsule of metal that you can all sit in the quiet and talk. Like, actually get out there and brush shoulders with people and do a lot of walking and see just how you feel and how you experience. That is a lot of family bonding as well. So don't discount those small little things. We still do those all the time, especially when we get the itch again to travel. We're like, oh, we want to get back out there, but we don't have the time or the money right now. We will take a day and just, you know, either go on a little just road day trip to some small towns around us, or we will pick some kind of local place and go away for the weekend, go camping, even just be tourist in your own town. I'm a big believer in that. There's a lot of these places. I think everybody can say, there's so much in my own town I haven't done, when you look at these like events and museums and stuff like that. So go actually do those things and just be a tourist at home and experience that together. But don't discount this idea just because of how you know your kids now, because the more experiences you give them out and about, the better they'll become at it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the operative words that you were talking about is that everybody does the same thing. Everybody's on the subway. Everybody's at the art museum. Everybody's eating at the little diner. And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of parents are afraid because, my child would just, throw a fit, or my child would have a temper tantrum, or, my child's too young. No, don't do that. Just go. Just go, because you'll be amazed at how well kids adapt and how many times, in my experience, my kids handle hardship better than I do. Mm-hmm. Discomfort, not having a bed to sleep on, bugs, spiders, things like that, the heat. They'll handle a lot better than I will. And I'll be, this is horrible. And they're just sort of playing along. Well, Tish, you're an extraordinary lady. You have an extraordinary message. And I think the message that you have for every single parent is very, very important, because you're on to something. You are on to raising a family that, when your kids are in their 20s and 30s or 40s, they're going to want to be with you and they're going to want to be together. And I think that's what raising kids is all about, is raising kids who are good people, who learn empathy and compassion for those around them, and who learn how to adapt and work closely with loved ones. And they will have a bond that they will have for life. And I encourage every parent to try to make some time to spend with your kids away from home, doing something that's out of your comfort zone, because what you get back is unimaginable. You just can't really imagine what you're going to get back from it until you really go off and do it. So sometimes you just got to jump like you did. You just got to buy that plane ticket, or buy 5 plane tickets in your case. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Tish, how can people reach you? How can they find out about At Home in the World? Give us some information about you, because I really want people to listen who have not ever listened to your podcast to listen to your podcast and read your books.
Yeah, well, the book and everything related to the book is at homeintheworldbook.com, and that's where you can find where to get it. There's a quiz, there's videos of our trip, things like that. But my online home is theartofsimple.net, and that's where you can find links to everything. You can find my podcast, the blog I help run, and all my social media stuff, Twitter, Instagram, all that. So it's just easy to say, theartofsimple.net.
I love it. Well, I strongly encourage everybody to go to The Art of Simple and listen to the podcast, pick up one of Tish's books. She's written other books too, but you have a very, very important message for this time in history. So thank you so much for being who you are and doing what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking with you.
All right, parents, let's get social. I want to hear from you and interact with you. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Meg Meeker MD. Or if you have a question, send it to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Today, I have a question from Janet, who writes, "Hello, Dr. Meg. I've been listening to your podcasts and love them." Thank you, Janet. "I just finished episode number 9 about what we say matters, and it really hit home. My husband has a negative tone when he speaks to our 12-year-old son. Sometimes it's so over the top, I tell him to settle down, and he'll always try to justify his tone by saying our son's behavior deserved it. When he talks like that, how should I respond or not respond? He's just so mean. And I try to spare my kids' feelings, but I don't want to undermine my husband either. How should I try to diffuse it?" I want to say something at the beginning, Janet. I assume you're talking about a husband who doesn't have a rage issue. If your husband really has a serious anger issue where he's losing control, he's screaming at you or screaming at your son, or he's acting violently, you need professional help, and he needs professional help. So I'm going to answer your question assuming that your husband is a reasonable guy who just when he deals with your son gets all of his buttons pushed and he loses his cool and he yells. But otherwise, he's a pretty reasonable guy. I would say that if your husband has a bit of a temper in talking with your son, chances are you may be a little intimidated to talk to him about his mistakes, because many times people with a temper use the temper as an intimidation tactic to silence you and everybody else. So don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid of him, unless, of course, as I said, you have reason to be, then it's a different story. The way a father speaks to his kids has a strong impact on the child's self-image, his sense of value as a person, and the way the child views the world and his whole outlook on life. So you're very right to want to help curb your husband's tone of voice. First, I would do something like this. Approach him in a firm but loving way, not feeling intimidated, but not being aggressive, and say to your husband, you know, I know you really love Johnny, and I can tell by the way that you're trying to teach him. And I see how he looks at you, that he listens to you. I see there are times when you're communicating things I think you don't really want to be communicating. In other words, you're approaching him as though you're on his side. You're not talking to him to reprimanding him, but to say, you know, we're allies in this parenting thing. And I get what you're trying to do, but I'm not sure you hear yourself. So say, for instance, when you told Johnny he made mistakes on his homework, you sounded condescending and mean. And I know you didn't mean to be that way. I watched Johnny while you were talking, and I saw him get really afraid, and he tuned you out because he stopped listening to what you were saying because he was afraid. And I really know that he'd listen to you better if you spoke more calmly. So when you approach your husband with a tone of respect, a tone of empathy, and you're not coming at him with your fists up, ready to criticize him, but say, I get what you're trying to do, but I don't think you understand how you're coming across, much more likely to get through to him. Second, realize many fathers subconsciously project their own feelings about themselves at their son's age right onto their sons. In other words, if your husband didn't like being 12 and he felt bad about himself, maybe he was a bit of a rascal and he felt poorly, his self-esteem was bad at 12, he felt too fat, too tall, too thin, too pimply, whatever, he's going to project those feelings subconsciously onto your son, and that's going to make him interact in a very negative way towards your son. Now, a lot of dads don't realize they're doing this. Mothers do this with their oldest daughters as well. And this isn't fair to the kids. It's not fair to your son. So the best way to help your husband stop this is when he's not talking to your son, ask him about life when he was 12. I say, what were you doing when you were 12? What was it like? How did your parents talk to you? What did you like about yourself? What did you not like about yourself? Ask him to show you pictures when he was 12 and 11. Don't be super obvious when you're doing it, but just say, I just like to kind of talk to you about your life, and let's talk about my life a little bit. And in other words, try to get him to see that maybe some of the feelings he had about himself are coming through onto his son in their relationship. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. Much more common than you think. And third, the other way to help your husband is to address how he was parented. Most parents who are yellers were yelled at. Most dads who yell at their sons were yelled at when they were kids. The same is true with moms. If you grew up in a home where your parents yelled at you, that's going to be your MO when you parent your own kids. So it's really important to recognize that we always do what we're familiar with. We repeat what we know, not what we want. So it's really important to ask your husband, how does he want to parent and how was he parented? You know, how did his parents talk to him? And if they were yellers, ask, how did you feel when your parents yelled at you? Was it effective? Did it work? And he may say, oh yeah, whenever my dad told me to do something, I hopped too. And say, well, okay, but did you like that? Did it make you feel good about life? Do you think if your dad approached you differently, would that have worked better on you? And maybe if it worked better on you, chances are it's going to work better on our son too. So in other words, you're digging with your husband and you're asking him questions and you're having him come up with the answers, not you. And fourth, I would address this anger issue in general. You know, a lot of men who are angry about stuff at work, angry about their marriage, angry with a friend, angry at their parent, take it out on their kids because kids are an easy target. So if there's an overlay of general anger that your husband has, it's coming out on your son, you need to, as a loving spouse and an unintimidated spouse, talk to your husband about that and say, honey, I'm concerned about your anger. I'm concerned in general. I see you're unhappy at work, or you're struggling with our marriage, or you're unhappy with your brother or sister. And I think you're taking it out on our kids. And I think that this isn't fair to them, and it's not fair to you. So talk to him about general anger issues, about other things, and make sure you help him realize it's not fair to take out anger that really should go towards other places and people onto your son. Parents, I just love answering your questions, so please keep sending them to me. You can email your parenting questions to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. I want to thank my guest, Tsh Oxenreider, who is an inspiration. Her book is a great read. You're going to learn so much about parenting in other cultures, people in other cultures, and how you navigate dicey situations with your kids. So I'd like now to recap my points to ponder. 1, encourage your kids to live every day, not just avoid dying. Take a risk. 2, share stressful experiences with your kids because it causes you all to grow closer. And 3, more face-to-face time with your kids strengthens your relationships. And until next time, parents, remember, great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 38, Teaching Your Kids About Other Cultures. And thanks to you, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 1 million downloads. You can like Dr. Meeker on Facebook and follow her on Twitter and Instagram @MegMeekerMD. Just as a reminder, go to megmeekermd.com and sign up for her newsletter for giveaway opportunities and updates. And don't forget to share the podcast, write us a review, and click subscribe so you won't miss an episode.